Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the webinar, How to Use the Platform When Presenting. Most of you know my email address, my website, and that I also post regular tips on Facebook around public speaking tips, presentation skills. This webinar is about the platform. So you're speaking or you're presenting or you're running a workshop, and think of your entire space in front of you as the platform. It doesn't have to be an elevated stage necessarily. It may. It could just be a small space in front of the room. But how do you use that platform effectively? In terms of webinars, please ask questions as we go. Type into your dialog box and I'll answer that question straight away, or I may hold on to that question tool a little bit later on. Please take notes. And I think one of the most important things is to participate, and you can pass comments as well as questions, but apply this to your next presentation or to a previous presentation. In other words, how can you use some of the information that I'm going to give you in the 30 minutes? How can you use some of that information to change or enhance a presentation you've just completed, in the recent weeks, or a presentation you've got coming up in the next week or 2 weeks? It's the application of what I'm going to teach you that's more important than the theory. So why am I talking about platform mechanics, using the stage? Because it's part of your non-verbal communication. It's part of your body movement. And while gestures may be your hands, the platform is non-verbal communication. This research, this is old, everybody knows about it. Around about half, whether it's 55, 53, 58, about half of your message, half of your engagement, half of your ability to impact and influence comes from the non-verbal communication. So great words with poor use of the platform, poor non-verbal communication may lessen the impact of your presentation. And Malcolm Gladwell looked at job interviews. 15 seconds, first impressions count, was the time that he worked out that interview panels had kind of summed up and worked out who they were going to give the job to. 15 seconds. That 15 seconds is how you walk in, how you sit down. Once again, your body language, your non-verbal communication, very important. So that's why I want to drill down and take a subset of your body language and just talk about your use of the platform. So my call to action for all of you today is, and take this in stages, but get out from behind the lectern and make use of the platform. So that's my call to action. Get out from the lectern and make use of the platform. So Leanne, I think you've just joined us, so welcome. Agenda for today, why? Why come out from the lectern? How do you stand in front of the audience? What's the right way to stand, and your resting positions, your posture and breathing. I'm going to give you some high-level information around anchoring, using the platform to anchor your message, the concept of decontamination. Dealing with difficult or tough stuff is one way you can use decontamination, and a couple of other advanced platform skills. Just in 30 minutes. Once again, choose the information that is most applicable to your own personal circumstances. So most people stand behind the lectern when they present. Most people like the safety, the protection, and they can have their notes, and it's quite a secure place. But why am I asking you to come out from behind the lectern? It's really quite simple. It's using the platform and some neurolinguistic programming show that the most powerful position in the platform for creating an adult learning experience, for creating change, is in the middle of the room, slightly forward. That's the most powerful position on the platform. The second most powerful position is still in the middle of the room, but just a little bit back. So that's the second most powerful position. I would not deliver my entire presentation from position number one, purely because I will be a little bit in your face. But if you stand in the center of the room and then move forward every now and then to emphasize your key points, to really nail home your take-home messages, and then move back to the middle of the room, that is effective use of the platform. And of course, the third most influential position is off to the right-hand side from the audience's perspective. That is where most lecterns are. I know there are some lecterns in the middle of the room when you do the really big conferences, and you might then argue that I'm now standing in the most powerful position, and they'll have a screen on either side. I presented a keynote at a conference last week, and there was 3 screens. So there was a screen behind me and a screen to the right 1/3 and a screen to the left 1/3. But I still walked across and spoke to these people for a while, and then I walked back and spoke to these people for a while. So the most powerful thing to do is to use all aspects of the stage. And of course, if the lectern is over here on the left-hand side from the audience, the right-hand side from the speaker's perspective, if you deliver your presentation all the time over here, you've chosen the weakest position from an adult influence, from a neuro-linguistic programming point of view, to deliver your information. Also, when you get out from behind the lectern and you stand in front of the audience, so when you get away from the lectern and you stand in front of the audience, what you're saying to them is, here I am, you can have all of me. You can have my pimples, my warts, my idiosyncrasies, my bald head. You can have all of me. I'm prepared to take the risk and stand in front of you and share my passion, my knowledge, openly, honestly, and authentically. When you stand behind a table or a lectern, what I'm saying to you is, I don't trust you guys enough. I'm not prepared to take the courage to get out and speak to you without this protective barrier. Now, I understand in big conferences, the general requirement may be to stand behind the lectern, but at some stage, with that deeper learning, that take-home message, that real important bit of information, come out from behind the lectern and stand in the middle and say, so guys, what do you think about that? What's the next step? How are you going to take away this information and change everybody's lives, or whatever your core message is? So that's why we get out from behind the lectern. You're just choosing one of the weaker positions. Now, I've said get out from behind the lectern. Please don't move left to right aimlessly. This is called the cat on the hot tin roof. So when you do come out from behind the lectern, you come out for purpose. You use the platform for purpose, not just wandering from side to side. That will be really distracting to some of the listeners, some of your audience. So it's not about wandering aimlessly. It's about using the platform for purpose. And you may then go back behind the lectern and refer to some notes. Clearly, one of the requirements to get out from behind the lectern in a bigger conference is to have a lapel microphone or one of those headset microphones. If the only microphone you have is anchored in the lectern, by default, you can't leave. Even a handheld microphone, you can leave, but I prefer the hands-free microphones attached to my tie or the headset. So your stance, you're standing before the audience. How do you stand? Don't do what we call the fig leaf. This is passive. Hands in pockets and small drop shoulders. This is also a passive stance. When you do your your legs wider than your shoulders. This is an aggressive stance. I see a little bit of this. So here's his shoulders. I see a little bit of this when I work in the mining sector. Whoops, that's not quite straight. And people, when they're doing their pre-start or their safety meetings, they take that wide stance. Understand, especially to female audiences, this looks quite aggressive. So his feet should be within those lines. So make sure your stance is no wider than your shoulder width. Generally, around your hip width is a nice width to put your feet. So be careful of that aggressive stance. Ignore the face, that's obviously an aggressive closed face, but this is not a good stance as a presenter. If you're looking at the audience, say you're presenting and you're looking at the audience and they've got their arms folded, it does not necessarily mean that they're closed or that they're not open to your ideas. This is in fact a comfortable way to sit. As a presenter, however, don't adopt it. It looks a little bit aggressive, as does arms behind your back. This is called the Sergeant Major. And this one, as you know, is also closed or aggressive in terms of stance. So good stance by your side, parallel to your chest, so your belly button. Don't drop your hands down to the fig leaf. And the other one, of course, is 50-50, which would be one hand by your side and the other hand over your belly button, but ready to gesture, ready to gesture. Posture with breathing. And I've included sitting here as well. When you lean back in the chair, it changes your breathing. You know our musicians, the excuse me, the saxophonists and other wind instruments, they sit in the front third. The guitarists sit in the front third of their seat when they are performing, to put them in their peak performance. Don't lean on the table, don't lean on the lectern. I've mentioned the resting positions of your hands for standing. The physiology of excellence is the feet slightly apart, standing upright, breathing nice and deep. And I'll just go back one slide. When you have your hands positioned here, or as I said, the 50-50, so one hand will be down by the side and the other hand remains here, what that enables you to do is to check in that you're breathing. In other words, if your belly button is not breathing in and out, if your hand is not moving out, in and out, then you've stopped breathing. So when I'm about to be introduced as a keynote speaker, I will sit off to the side or stand off to the side, and I'll have one hand on my belly button, the other hand by my side, and I'll just do that deep diaphragmatic breathing. That's down low, as opposed to the top shallow nervous breathing where your shoulders rise up and down. The audience will also notice your breathing. So if you are a little bit nervous, it will come through in your breathing. So that deep breathing and standing upright with the physiology of excellence is a brilliant way to purvey or indicate confidence even if you are nervous. Let me talk about anchoring. So in an audience, and you can come out from the lectern, when you move to the audience's right, this is the past. When you move to the middle, this is the present. And when you move to the audience's left, that's the future. So you might talk about something in the past, the way we used to do things. You might talk about the current situation, and you might talk about your vision in the future. Let's say you don't have a future, you just want to talk about the past. That's fine, and the present. Then you're doing 2-point time series anchoring. If you want to remember this, it is the way the audience reads across the screen. It's the way the audience reads across the screen. So as you can see, the past is over here. The present's here, as we would read this way. So as a speaker, you need to flip it. You need to flip it because it's the past, present, future from the audience's perspective. You can also do what's called spatial anchoring, and you might have 3 points. You can do point 1 there, you can do point 2 here, and you can do point 3 there. Then you might move back to the center and you might tell some stuff. Then you might reiterate point 1. By moving to the same place in the stage, you're just anchoring that point 1. And then you might say, because if we don't do point 1, the consequence is point 3, and you move to this position in the stage. And of course, staying the same, which might be point 2, is really not acceptable either. So what I'm really asking you to do is move towards point 3. 1, 2, 3, spatial anchoring. The past, present, future is called time series anchoring, where you anchor the past. This morning I spoke about this. Now I want to talk about this, and this afternoon I want to talk about that. Just move to the platform, time series. Point 1, point 2, point 3. I would generally make the positive point in the middle if you've got a positive, and 2, this is no good and I don't think this will work. And then you keep coming back to nail your second point in the middle. So that is spatial anchoring and time series anchoring. Let me talk about decontamination, another use of the platform. So decontamination is when you're dealing with some tough stuff or some negative information or a tough question. Remember, I've already said that this is the most powerful position on the stage. And this is where I want you to nail those important points, come back and conclude. It's a great place to open strong. And then you might have to go back behind the lectern and use your notes or quote some data. But you might open with a challenging question, or you might move there and close with a call to action. Obviously, or sometimes in the presentation, you will get some negative information to deal with, or you might get a difficult, contentious question. The process of decontamination is taking that question off to the side and back a little bit. So look, that's a really good point you've just raised there. I don't agree with you, and I think you're a little bit off track. So hang on to that thought, and I'll have a chat with you at morning tea. So don't contaminate this position of excellence. Instead, take it off to the side and deal with it. Which side doesn't really matter. I've only drawn the X there because I've got the data projector over the lectern over here. So decontamination is keeping this place clean. This is where you want to leave the really good stuff. This is where you want to be able to nail your conclusion. So when do you use decontamination? What's some examples for your decontamination? Well, there's several things that we can do. There's trying something new. So let's say you want to start with a humorous opening. Yep, you're going to start with a joke. If you stand in the middle of the platform and you start with a joke and it falls flat, you've now contaminated that part of the platform. So what I would do is I would stand off to the side. The first time I'm trying this new opening, a new quote, something humorous, and if it falls flat, I can now move back into the center and say, look, we're not here to talk about that. I don't know what that person was talking about, but clearly he's off track. What I want to talk about today is, and you've recovered by going back to that position of excellence, that center in the stage. Whereas if you fall flat on that particular area, then it's really hard to recover and to make that clean again. Difficult questions, as I mentioned, move off to the side. Look, that's quite a difficult question. In fact, it's a little bit out of scope of what I want to talk about, and in fact, I'm not going to discuss it. Look, I don't agree with you. You're completely at odds with me, and you obviously haven't been listening. Take that off to the side. You know, the good cop, the bad cop. Do the good stuff here and do the bad stuff off to the side. Just 3 ways or 3 reasons that you could use the platform to decontaminate or deal with tough stuff or deal with difficult information. Any questions at this stage? So responding to questions is another time to use the platform. This is a little bit of a high level thing. Now, if the person, this is your stage, let's say this is your audience here, and the person here asks a question, what I suggest you do is you move over to here. So in other words, away from the person asking the question. As you receive the question, observe, eye contact, look at everyone else in the room. What's happening? Have they stopped breathing? Have they rolled their eyes? Are they shaking their head from side to side? This is you reading what's happening in the audience. If everyone in the audience nods their head or keeps breathing, you know you can answer the question. Then you can move to the middle of the room and respond to everyone in the room as you answer the question. How do most people deal with questions? They move towards the asker of the question. They move towards him. And they neglect what's happening in the rest of the room. So they don't know if these people have stopped breathing or if they've rolled their eyes. So it's about group dynamics. Move away from the person asking the question. Yes, you've got a question. Watch the group dynamic, the group response. Deal with the question accordingly. If someone asks you a question that you don't want to answer, is outside of scope, and you notice everyone else in the room is nodding their head, you need to deal with that question or you're going to lose the whole audience. If someone asks you a question, everyone gasps, rolls their eyes, shakes their head, then you know that this is an outlier and this person probably often asks inappropriate questions, so you can respond accordingly by dealing with that question one-on-one. Let's have a chat about that over morning tea. So your responsibility is to the group more so than the individual. Sometimes you want to be approachable, start of the presentation, palms up. So as a speaker, getting out from behind the lectern, people can see your non-verbals. Palms up, approachable, palms down, credible. You want to urge caution, you want to give them the 4-step process. Verticality of eye contact. So as a presenter, when you get out in front of the audience, away from the lectern, you can gesture high. And I love having a whiteboard or a flip chart, because when I write something up, your eyes go up. When you, the audience's eyes go up, and so when I gesture high, you're going into your thinking, analyzing, and considering your neurological response. Really good for leaving some data, some information. However, if I want to create some emotion, then what I need to do is gesture low. So when I gesture low, when I bring my gestures into my midriff, then I'm creating that emotional response. This is called the visceral or the gut response. This is when I want you to experience things. This is when I want you to feel things. This is when I want to appeal to your heart rather than to your head or your neurological response. If you're standing behind the lectern, it's really hard to do this. Trauma counsellors will often ask people to describe what happened, the event, the armed hold up, and they'll stand up and they'll write it on the whiteboard, the steps. So people, as they go through what happened, they're not reliving the emotional experience. They're just going through the time that the armed hold up occurred. The gunman walked in, he said this, he said, hand over your money, and they're not getting that emotional response. Other times, as a presenter, you want to create that feeling, that emotional response, so gesture low. So that's just some advanced stuff stuff for you. So my call to action, get out from behind the lectern. There's so many powerful things you can do, from decontamination, from anchoring your points by having 2 points in the stage or 3 points, by moving from past, present, future, and painting the vision on one side of the stage and going back to where we are at the moment, from creating that approachability at the beginning of your presentation. You're really pleased to be here and you want to share some wonderful information as your palms are clearly facing up to the audience. Then when you get into the crux of your presentation, you want to move from being approachable to credible, and you change your palms. Any last questions? As you're typing in the questions, you know I've got some upcoming workshops. Bunbury, Brisbane, Perth. You know to go to my website and just click on events. The next webinar, I run 2 every month, so today's the 1st of September. Next one is Thursday, 17th of September, and about thinking and speaking off the cuff. Really good when you're put under the pressure, job interview skills, asked to respond to a question, asked at a meeting to give a quick update on your project. So this is thinking and speaking off the cuff. This is my free webinars. And as always, feel free to contact me via email, resources on my website. I'm assuming that most of you found out about my webinars through my newsletter, so sign up for my newsletter. And as I mentioned, I post tips on Facebook. So get out from behind the lectern and make use of the platform. It takes courage to get out from behind the lectern. You may not do it all the time, especially at those high-level conferences, but just that key takeaway, that really important information when you want the eyes, not up at your PowerPoint slides, you want the eyes coming down the middle of the room at you as you stand at that position of most influence, the position of most power in the middle of the room. Try and do that at least once every presentation. So if there's no further questions, I will end the webinar there.